right. I think we got this going on. I'm gonna put some background music on, so if I'm not talking, everything's good. I've got to test a few things. Looks like it's working. I like that there. It's not showing up on the screen. Maybe it is. I can't see it. It's so tiny. Oh, I gotta hit the... There we go. Hey, look at me. First try, everything's working. Shut the front door. Let me bring the chat over so I'm not constantly careening my neck. Boop. 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 And that's really bright, so we need to turn that down. Okay. We made it. For those of you that didn't know, well, last week was Adepticon 2026. This is actually my third time going, but this is my first time. I cannot sit here and stare at a video of myself. That's really awkward. Can I make this not? I just want the chat. Give me the chat. I could probably pause it. There we go. That's a lot less distracting. But yeah, so this is actually my third time going, but this is my first time doing Mantic events. First time I went, we did the big Warhammer team tournament. And then the second time I went, we actually didn't do any official events. We maybe did one or two demos, kind of perused a little bit, clocked in and did some work at the GW booth to help our buddies out so they could get like lunch breaks and stuff like that, and did a little bit of help on cleanup and pack up and stuff like that. So this year was my first year doing anything Mantic related for Adepticon, and this is my second Mantic event ever. You know, like I did the Michigan GT Firefight tournament. That was kind of my first experience with Firefight. So I was going to do the Firefight tournament this year. It was Thursday, and I was looking at everything else that I could do, and I thought, you know, I don't really know Halo and Dead Zone that well. I dabble, like I've played them, but mostly with my kids, so I don't really know them. I'm not, you know, I don't know them like I know Firefight. So I thought, you know, I'll do the Dead Zone Nationals and see how that goes and see how it plays. And then I thought, you know, I'll also do the Kings of War event. And then I thought, well, I don't have an army for Kings of War, so maybe I won't do that one. And fortunately for me, Adam Ballard, big shout out to you, man, came in clutch. He was like, hey, we can get you one of a few armies. You can use them for the event, so don't feel like not having an army is going to be an obstacle for you. So come on out and play. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll do that. So I ran Night Stalkers for Kings of War. I ran Enforcers for Firefight. Hey, what's up, buddy? Welcome. You know, I ran and I'm sorry if I'm not super loud. I'm trying to project a little bit, but I am still a little hoarse from just shouting after 15 games at a competitive level. And if you were at Adepticon, you got to experience me at a table. I'm pretty high energy. So that being said, you know, so I got to experience all these games at a competitive level, and yes, I'm a horse. I'm a horsey. A lot of Fosters in my life, man. Foster's Imaginary Friends, if you didn't get that reference. So I did that. Got my Enforcers. Played those for Firefight because my buddy Bailey, I dragged him out to the Firefight tournament, and he wanted to use not Enforcers. So he used my Veermen, and, you know, because he used my Veermen, I kind of had to use my Enforcers because my Night Stalkers weren't going to be built and painted in time, and I didn't want to have to just, like, speed build and paint them. So I took my Enforcers out, played them, and tell them all the fun. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. So I did all that. And did you take the rocket launchers for the Enforcers? I did run the missiles. I ran a squad of missiles, and we're going to kind of touch on that because I'm going to go in chronological order after I give the overview. So I had Firefight, then Dead Zone, then Kings of War. Thursday was Firefight. I think it was 16 players. It was either 14 or 16, because I think it was actually 15 with a drop or 17 with a drop, and I forget how it all mathed out. And 4 rounds, 1,250 points. I don't remember the missions right now. They're not super important. The first mission was the one where you've got was the first one with the bodyguard tokens? I think so. It's the one where you have the drones, and when you charge a unit but you win the assault, you take the drone. But round 1 I got to play against, gosh dang it, somebody I never met. So that was cool. I have notes. They're not in front of me. This is kind of my life, you know. And again, if you're not new to the channel, you know what it's like. But round 1, played a game. Super nice dude. Jordan, that was his name. And he played Marauders. And, you know, the bodyguard mission is good. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember if that was the first mission. That's all. It's one of those, like I said, it's. I remember we played Control. We played Bodyguard. We played the one where you gotta run to the middle of the board and then grab the objectives and play Keep Away. And then Manpower. So, like, again, the missions themselves weren't largely important to the experience. But I know some people are going to be like, well, what missions did you play? So I figured I'd try to remember. But it was Jordan. It was his name. Super nice dude. Inexperienced, which was one of those things that showed. He was a little bit slower, and there's nothing wrong with it. You know, I'd much rather have people come out and play that are nice, but a little bit slow, than are rude, but play at pace. You know, I'd rather have an enjoyable game. But we had a good time. And we kind of went through the game. I did have the missiles like was asked. I took a squad of the missiles, a squad of defenders. I did a list preview, so I'm not going to run through the whole thing right now. And it's actually posted in the Firefight Fanatics page. Somebody had asked about lists, and I put a copy of it there. Really good dude. We got through about 3 turns. I ended up edging him out. It was like 4-3. And had we gone all 5, that would have been a rough game, because he was almost tabled at 3, because the first couple of turns were me just kind of letting him hold objectives while I had to pick off key pieces. But the big thing, and I had to like walk him through the rules interaction on it, because he was just like, oh, I didn't realize that worked that way, was I had some peacekeepers, not the defenders, just regular peacekeepers, and I hit him with go, 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 and I walked into his Rainmakers and just deleted them. And then I got my consolidation, I shot the other Rainmakers, and then walked into him and just deleted them, right? So it was a huge chunk of his army that were just gone, and there was nothing he could do about it, and he was like, wait, can you please explain to me how that works? So I had to walk him through it and show him how everything interacted. And again, he got it. He was just like, man, I've never seen somebody do that before. I didn't know that could work that way. And I was like, yeah. Super, like I said, super nice dude. He actually doesn't live that far from me, which was kind of cool. So we're going to probably plan to be meeting up to play some games in the next few weeks. And that was probably my favorite experience about a lot of it, is just meeting new people and being like, oh, you're not that far from me, you know, stuff like that. Round 2, I got to play my friend Bailey. And Bailey's pretty new to the game, and I laugh because, man, like, it's just funny. He's pretty new to the game. Unfortunately for him, the list that he had borrowed from me is kind of a technical one, and Veermen tend to be a bit more of a technical army anyway, so it's not, you have a higher skill floor for that army, and then couple that with the fact that the way that list operates, it's like even a little bit higher, right? And the reason I ended up playing him, even though he lost round 1, is because my score was so low that I had to get paired with somebody who had lost the game. But we played, and, you know, he scored some points, gave me dirty looks the whole time. But after the game, we sat and talked about it, and I was like, hey, man, like, I know you're struggling, and I know we talked about this a couple times before, but I know it's been a while, and I just walked him through how things needed to work. Like how you need to, if the crawlers aren't going to be pinning anything, there's no reason to shoot them unless you need that damage. So it's like, all right, if your crawlers aren't going to pin something, hit the dirt with them and then smoke them so that they're just like -3 to hit. You know, and it's going to be much harder for your opponent to sit there and shoot you off of the objectives. And he was just like, oh, and then, you know, so then what was cool about that was like his next round, he got a win. And he was just like, oh, I see how things are starting to work now. Like the light bulb was clicking on, everything was kind of clicking for him. And he was able to go, yeah, I get it now. Just check something real quick. Yeah. Just want to make sure it didn't freeze up on me. Sometimes it do. So yeah, he was just like, yeah, I get it now. So he got his win, and that was pretty neat. And the guy he played against was also a great dude. Felix was his name, I believe. He played Felix. Forge Fathers. So round 3, I pull Forge Fathers. And it is... Oh, I don't remember the name of the mission, but it's one of the many where you just put your objectives across the middle of the board, but there's none in your deployment zone. So there's no, like, you need to turtle, right? I believe that's what it was. You know, it's the one where you have to put them on your opponent's half of the board, though. And we're talking about our list. We're talking about everything. Super nice guy. I believe he's a German fella. I can't think of his name off the top of my head right now. But he had Forge Fathers. And I'm looking at his Forge Fathers, and I'm like... And again, if you've been around this channel, there's one thing you know, and that's that I just don't like dwarves. Every game that has them, they all just kind of interact the same. And it's just one of those things where it's like, it's nothing against people who play them. It's just this army in every game is literally just like... Yes, they do get their lessons rather quick. That is true. You know, especially if it's one of those things where if they're not visually, like, able to... If they're not able to draw those conclusions immediately, especially newer players, you know, it takes them a little bit longer. But if somebody can point them out, it's like, okay, I see it. Yeah, that's it, man. It's just like, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't. I'm like looking at his dwarves, and I'm just like, man, this guy seems like a really nice guy. But he's just not going to have fun, right? Win or lose, he's just not having fun, because like that's one of those things where it's like I just get extra dialed in, extra focused, because it's like I just have this weird thing where I just don't like him. And so he did some interesting things, and you know, was kind of on his back foot the whole game. He had a squad of the dwarf bikes, which those things look pretty nasty. I was actually surprised the other Forge Fathers player didn't have them, just because after seeing what they did, like I watched him play another guy, and I was just like, oh, those are gross. He kind of put them off in a corner, but they were kind of out in the open. I didn't have to worry about cover or anything like that. And I was looking at them, and I'm looking at like where I had put my missiles, because there was a big block of cover in the center of the board, but kind of close to my deployment zone, right? Like just lined up on that middle line. And I put my missiles behind them because I could go, hop out, shoot, and then go, you know, back in. And he couldn't do anything about it. Now, he did have an artillery piece, and these were the two things that I think really just made him lose the game. But I think he just kind of got so frustrated from the early damage that the missiles caused that he just kind of lost his focus. Turn 1, he activated like some boys and ran them up on an objective or something like that. And I'm going to jump back to the Marauders game in just a minute, because again, if you're new to the channel, just a heads up, my brain is just a grenade. So he activated some boys, ran them up towards an objective. Yeah, missile hop for sure. I popped them up onto, you know, so I'm like looking at what he did, and his bikes are just still sitting in the open, because like I was looking at those bikes and I was like, man, maybe he's just going to scream them up the table to get them behind cover, you know. And then if he does that, I'll just shoot at the tank, and even if I don't kill the tank, I can put damage on it and I don't have to worry about it, right? You know, because if I put damage on the tank and it pins, he's either going to have to sit and shoot with the tank, and it's the artillery piece, or he's going to have to move it if he doesn't want those missiles. So I can either force it to be stationary or force it into not shooting, potentially. So he didn't really do anything there, right? Like, so I'm like looking at the board, and I'm looking at the board, and I'm thinking, man, maybe he knows something I don't. And he knows what the missiles do. I was the third Enforcers player he played that day. He had round 1, round 2, round 3, all Enforcers. So he knew what the missiles did. So I was just like, all right, man, I'm going to spend 2. I'm going to go, and I'm going to shoot your bikes. And I picked up all 3 of them. You know, they all died, hopped them back into cover, and he was just like, oh. And, you know, he was like, honestly, that's the first time the whole squad's died, and it's the earliest they've even gotten tagged. The best thing about the missile launchers is that to get them... Well, so, like, I just had 1 brick of missile launchers. And I didn't put them in the squads. I ended up just taking 1 of the heavy support boys and just all missiles. I took 5 missiles. And I'm kind of mixed on it. Like, it wasn't bad, it wasn't good. It's just one of those things where it's just a little different than what I would usually run. I didn't necessarily like how static a lot of stuff felt, but everything worked out, you know. And it was just one of those, like, for like 3 straight turns, I just like jumped out, picked stuff up, but he was not using that indirect to shoot at him. Because it's like, man, even if he doesn't really do anything, if he gets 1 damage through, he's at least or 1 hit through, he's gonna pin them, and then he's gonna have to force me to use my captain to remove the pin, and at least force my hand at spending command points, right? And that's what I was looking at. It's like, if I were him, I'd just be plinking those missile launchers with pins to try to force more command points out of me, rather than just like letting me do whatever I want. Yeah, and I didn't take the Peacekeeper captain. I took the regular captain, and I took the Assault Enforcer captain. And honestly, the Assault captain, I had a really good experience with, because there were quite a like two of the games, it really helped dictate the flow of combat. 2 of the games, 1 game it didn't matter because of the mission, which we'll get into. And then the other game, it didn't matter because my buddy Bailey was just like, yeah, whatever, you're going to do whatever you want anyway. I don't give a shit. You know, like, that was kind of his attitude in the game. So, like, we ended up finishing that game, and it was, I think by the end of the game, without, like, looking at it, it was like 27-3. Like, I had just hammered him. And he was like, oh my God. And I just, you know, he took it well. He was very jovial throughout the game. He didn't get sulky or salty, which I appreciate. You know, it was just like, man, that was rough. You know, and I told him, like, we were joking about it a little bit, honestly. And he was like, oh, my dice were bad. And then he had a couple bad rolls. I had a couple good rolls. I mean, but that's just a dice game. But after one of his rolls that, like, was kind of poopy, he was just like, oh my gosh, they're dying on me. And I was like, they're just tired of bullying Enforcers, you know. But so we got done, and then I went to round 4, and that was against Adam Ballard, which I'd never met him outside of a couple interactions on social media. Super nice dude. Glad I got to meet him. And I ended up losing that game, and I lost it pretty handily, but it was... He didn't... I'm trying to think of the best way to, like, word this, because I don't want to come off sounding like a dick, you know? Because he's a skilled player. He's definitely a skilled player. But he didn't so much win that game as much as I just lost it. And a lot of that comes down to sometimes I'm just an idiot, you know? We had this big, weird, goofy terrain feature in the middle. And it didn't really look like a hill visually, but it didn't really have anything that you could classify it as in the book. And he was just like, hey man, we've been playing this as a hill all day, our, you know, last couple rounds. Are you fine with me playing it as a hill? And I was like, yeah, I don't care, because, like, sure, I'm going to have line of sight to your big things. You're going to have line of sight to me. That's fine. Like, we both benefit from it. He was playing Plague. So it's like we both benefit from it. And for the most part, I don't really care what the terrain is with Enforcers anyway. Like, I've got Jump Pack or Anti-Grav. I'm just going to kind of, like, get to do or go where I want to anyway. So it's whatever you want. I don't care. But I'd be goddamned if I didn't just like plant things up against it, thinking it wasn't a hill, and then I got charged by Teratons. And then but then it was like, oh yeah, they're Teratons. They just go through stuff. And then I got charged by something else. And then I got charged by something else. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a hill. Like, it took about 3 or 4 charges before my brain just would remember. And at that point, it was just too late. I had been too much of an idiot. And we did talk about it afterward. He's like, I don't know that I should have won that game. And I was like, yeah, I mean, maybe. I said, you're a good player. I made some mistakes, and you're good, so you capitalized on them. I said, I was just kind of a dumbass. And he was like, yeah, what happened there? And I explained it to him, and, he and I had a good laugh about it. So Adam ended up coming in first. I came in third. And then I think a guy named Marcelo, that's who came in second, playing GCPS. And so, poor Marcelo. We'll get into that in a minute, too. But yeah, so that fourth game was one of those like, all right, dude, the next time we play, it's not going to be this way. Like, I got your number. But going back to that game with Jordan, that was one of those things where it was like, he just had never seen somebody play enforcers the way that, like, not that I do them a special way, but more just maybe at that skill level, or maybe I do them a little bit differently than maybe his local community does. I don't know. But the point is just like, he had seen some things with how I was doing it that he was just like, I didn't realize that would do that. And we talked before the game, because it was bodyguard, because it's the one where you put the bodyguards on the units and then you can take them. So he had me deploy first. I deployed in the corner, as I usually do. And then I put my bikes mid-board behind cover. And then he deployed. And then I put my tokens out. And really, I should have had 2 extra points. But again, sometimes I'm just an idiot. I forgot to move the bodyguards out of my deployment zone turn 1, which is why I didn't have 2 more points. And it's just one of those, like, yeah, sometimes my autism gives me superpowers and sometimes it doesn't, And I'm not making fun. It's a real thing for me. And so, he put so most of my army was concentrated down in the bottom right as I faced the board. He had 2 units of brawlers, commandos, whatever they are, orc boys, right? 2 units of orc boys up in the very opposite corner. And he put both of his tokens there. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, homeboy thinks they're safe. Bet. And, I told him, like, hey, these bike scout, they do all this stuff. They move 12, blah, 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 blah. He's okay. So I got to activate first. And before I activated, scout moved the bikes, because I know I get to activate first. Go, go, go. Move again. Shoot one of the guys. And I think I knocked him down to, like, 1 boy. Maybe killed the whole unit. I don't remember. And then move back behind cover. And so, like, they covered 36 inches in 1 turn. And he was just like, oh, that's so fast. And I was like, yeah, that's why I told you, like, hey, man, this is what they do. Because that's going to be one of those, like, why do they move like that? So it was just kind of funny. And then one of the guys next to me was like, they can't go, go, go. Go, go, go can't be used on vehicles. And I'm like, man, I don't think jet bikes are vehicles. Am I an asshole? Have I been playing that wrong this whole time? So I'm like looking, and they're not. And I should have trusted myself. But it's one of those like, man, maybe I am wrong. Maybe I've been a dick this whole time, So I had to double check it, and I was like, oh no, they're good. But yeah, no, that game with Adam was a lot of fun. Very intense. Like, neither one of us were laughing and joking during the game like I was throughout a lot of them. Like, we were both kind of like lasered in, really trying to figure out how to kind of outmaneuver and outposition each other. And what's cool was, like, the plague list that he was running is very similar to what I had built for my daughter for the league that she ended up coming in third in. So that was kind of neat. It was like, oh, cool. Like, I'm not too far off with what a competitive plague player might bring to an event. My buddy Garrett brought his plague list. I think he went 2 and 2, and it was like a bunch of leapers and leaper sentients. He ran into and there was a rules issue, and one of the guys he played was like, your orders don't interact that way, and I happened to be next to him, and I was like, yeah, they do, and he was like, no, you can't do that, and I was like, yeah, go bikes is clutch, man, super money, because Dominators are a really good versatile weapon. So you give them like a burst laser or a missile, and I think I had a burst laser on mine just because I had the squad of missiles. But you give them a burst laser or a missile, and then you give them that kind of mobility with that volume of fire, and a lot of it's AP1 because it was a unit of 3 bikes, and it was just like, man, those are nasty. Yep, and you couple that with that scout move. That's like I said, like 36 inches by the time I had finished activating them. You know, it's just like boom, 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 and he was just like, ah. But so he's just like, no, I'm gonna call the judge. I'm like, yeah, don't. I'm not gonna argue with you. Like, get the judge. Whatever the judge says, I'll stand behind. But like, yes, they do interact that way. And it was can 2 Leaper Sentients activate their order and allow everything to move twice, right? So like 1 Leaper Sentient activates and everything within 6 inches moves 3 inches. It's a 3-inch advance for free on the Sentience activation. So you can get one, move them all, get another, move them all, and so before most of your units have activated, you've already had like a 6-inch scout move for all intents and purposes. And he was just like, and he was playing GCPS, and it was the bodyguard mission. And he was just like, that's fine. So they get the judge, and the judge is like looking at it, he's like, that doesn't work that way. My buddy Garrett, he was just like, okay. So they played the game, and Garrett ended up winning, and, they were just like, it doesn't work that way. And I went up to the TO, and I was like, hey, I'm not trying to get you to change your ruling. Like, I agree that it should stand for the whole event, but I want you to know, like, it does actually work that way. I said, just so you're aware. And he was like, I don't think it does. And we went through the rules, and I showed him, like, look, like, there's nothing in here that says it shouldn't. I said, does it feel a little weird when it's done to you for the first time? Absolutely. Like, the first time you see a plague army just move 6 inches before anything else activates, and you just realize that realization sinks in that you're like, oh shit, this is about to hit me really hard. Like, it feels kind of bad, but if you know it's coming, you can plan for it, and you can kind of like position for it. So we ended up talking about it and the whole big thing, and like I said, like the TO, super fantastic. He didn't take offense to me talking to him about it, and I wasn't trying to be combative. It's just, I'm always of the opinion that we should all be on the same page, right? Like, we should all be playing by the same rules. And so, that's why I had to talk with him. And he's, like I said, super nice dude. It was just like, yeah, it does work that way. Just so you know, like, I ended up actually having to clarify it with the rules committee, because I felt the same way. I was like, man, is this really how this works? Like, we could do this? And the rules committee was just like, yes, you can. And it was just like, all right. Now, whether or not it gets addressed whenever the erratas and FAQs come out, that's a different question. It may not. Maybe Leaper Sentients go up a little bit in points. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But overall, like I said, I had a fantastic time. I have my bling, right? I've been showing it off as much as I can. So this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, right? Like, I know a lot of companies give out trophies and stuff, which is awesome. But like, these are awesome. Like, this is metal. Like, these are dope. I really like these. So I was glad I was able to snag one. And not like rip it off of somebody's neck, So that was cool. And then day 2, I did the Dead Zone tournament. And like I said, my experience with Dead Zone, super limited. Like, extremely limited. I played a handful of games of Halo with my kids. I've walked a couple people through Halo, like, at local stores. That's been about it. Like, I understand how the overall rules are kind of structured, but I've never played any of the missions for Dead Zone. I've never really played any of the units in Dead Zone, because mostly just played Halo. So for all intents and purposes, I was going into it almost completely blind. Round 1, opponent was super nice. He brought Veerman, And I told him, I was like, hey man, I've played like no games of this, right? I've played a little bit of Halo, but no games of this. So total noob, probably gonna win. I just want to have fun. I want to learn. Like that's what I want. And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. He was super nice. We kind of talked through things when it was like, okay, why does this work this way? Blah 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 blah. You know, and there was a period where he had realized, like, he was like, oh, I can't move this because I deployed it. And I'm like, bro, I don't care. Like, move it. I'd much rather you get to enjoy and play the game. Like, I have no misconceptions about how well I'm going to do. You know, so we had a great time. I took enforcers to that. I took 2 phase claw enforcers. I took the peacekeeper captain for that. I took 2 defenders and then a missile bike and I forget what else. A burst laser and a regular enforcer. And that might have been it. I don't remember at this point, but that's vaguely what it was. And honestly, like, after 4 games of it, like, I feel like what I brought, I could take that and probably do better now that I just have a better understanding as to how scoring works. Because that was a surprise to me round 2. Because I thought round 2, I was like, all right, I'm going to win this. Because I didn't realize the game just ends at 20 points. Right? So in a round in which either player scores at least 20 points, like they get to 20 as a score, at the end of that turn, the round ends. And then I also didn't know that if both players hit 20 in the same round, that game is a tie. So, like, I'm thinking, all right, man, like, I'm in control. I'm doing pretty good. I might actually come out with a win at round 2 because, like, things are starting to click. And, nah. Like, I ended up losing or tying because, again, that was a rule I didn't know existed. And I wasn't mad or upset about it at all because, again, I'm here to learn. His name was Henry, younger kid. He was actually the Firefight TO's son. Super nice. We had a great time. He played Asterians. I don't know the names of all of the units for Asterians because I've only seen a handful of them. But he had like the... That was an unfortunate tie. Well, that's one of those, like, it is what it is, man. So like early into that game, he had the Asterian character thing that like has the shield and comes and chops people in half and shit. I can't think of what it's called. And I put my peacekeeper captain just a little too far forward because I knew he had a move die, but I wasn't looking at the move die, right? Like I just kind of put him forward, and I should have just brought him back 1 extra square. Sure shit, like he just ran into it, killed my captain, and I was like, oh no. So I'm like looking at this thing that is now in my face because I just gave it a free charge. And I'm like, all right, well, how do I deal with this? And then I was like, oh, I'm just going to push a peacekeeper. Yeah, the Spectra. I'm going to push a peacekeeper defender in there with it. We're going to roll some dice. Then I'm going to push an enforcer with phase claws into it. And we're going to roll some dice. And then we're just going to see how long it takes you to kill them both. Like, that's fine. And honestly, like, that Spectra should have died. Because, like, there were multiple times I would put a lot of damage on it, and he would fail all of, like, all the defense rolls, but then he'd get to the weird, like, feel no pain shield generator interaction, and he'd just roll, like, all 8s. And I was just like, oh my god, will you stop this? Come on, man. But my plan at that point was to just try to gum it up with those 2 models for as long as I can, and just try to kill everything else and like, sit on objectives. And it worked. Like, by and large, it worked. And the whole game tying hinged on a lot of things happening for him. Like, a lot of things to go his way. And they ended up going his way. Because that thing had 1 life left. So he's like, all right, I'm going to disengage from you. So I got my free attacks, put damage on it, failed saves, made the shield gen feel no pain, whatever. And I was like, come on, dude. It's got 1 hit point left. Like, get out of here. Then it walked into another one of my models. Nothing to smash. Honestly, like, I didn't run into too many issues. Like, I get it. The biggest issue I ran into is, like, outside of phase claws, there's not really any AP that I saw, you know? But the phase claws actually, like, did work in Dead Zone. Like, they did a lot of good work. Because I went through, like I said, and I literally just killed everything else. And then just sat on objectives. But But then, like I said, he came out, killed something else, and then all I literally had to do was have like one of his models die. And it was very feasible because I think he had 2 units left. It was very feasible, and it just like didn't happen, you know. And it is what it is. But like I ended up hitting like 23 or 24 points, and then he ended up hitting 20 on the nose. And at that point, I didn't realize that was a tie though, because I was just like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, cool. I've got 22. You've got 20. In my brain, this makes sense. Like, I'm going to win regardless of who hit 20 first, because at the end of the round, I had more points. And he was like, oh, actually, that means it's a tie. And I was like, oh, I see. And like in retrospect, I don't necessarily understand that rule. Like, I'm kind of confused by it. I don't know why it exists. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It is what it is. And now that I know that that's how the game works, I can keep my eye open for it. But that was just one of those, like, why does it work this way? Like, why is this a thing that happens in this game? So, I don't know. If anybody knows, I'd love to have an answer. But regardless, Henry and I had a fantastic game. And that was the game where I started to... So, like, game 1 is I got the core rules down. Game 2 is, like, I started to kind of see how I needed to move my units, right? Like, I needed to keep my phase claws in the same square as my defenders. Because that was one of those, like, oh, like, those are kind of gross when you use them in tandem. Because, like, even if you fight back, my phase claws are now armor 2 because of the defender. So it was just one of those, like, okay. And then round 3, I actually ended up playing Henry's dad, Aaron, which was kind of funny. And we had a great time. He had Marauders. And it's one of those, our game was really close. I don't remember what the final score was, but it was really close. And he ended up getting me because I just, like, I needed to kill one model. Because that one model would have been a multi-point swing. And it would have prevented him from hitting 20. And I think it was, like, kept him from hitting 20 and bumped me up to 20. And it just didn't happen. So it's like, he got to 20 and I didn't. But we had a great time. And that game specifically, it was like, okay, I was too spread out. So it was kind of cool to kind of like, each game I was learning so that the next game I could do better. And unfortunately, round 4, I played, his name's Lee. He's a super nice guy. But that was the game where it was all kind of put together. Like, all of the stuff that I had learned throughout the tournament kind of got put together. He played Rebs. He had such a gorgeous army. He had these, like, shark things. I don't know what they were supposed to be, but I know they were sharks. And they were so cool looking. And so we're playing, and it's one of those, like I said, like, I don't know all the... And that's a big part of it, too, is I don't know what everything does yet. You know, so every game I'm playing something that I've never seen in Dead Zone. So I'm having to learn how to play while also try to retain what it is your army does. So that's like kind of makes it harder, you know? And he's got sharks, and he's like, do you want me to read through what they do? And I'm like, nah, I don't care, man. Like, and that was one of those that was really funny, and I'll kind of jump back to that in a second, that thought. But I'm looking at the sharks, and I'm like, God, those things look disgusting. Like, they've got these big blade hands, and they're sharks, they're great whites, like, they're coming to kill me. So I'm like, all right, he's giving me a line on one with my missile on my jet bike. I'm just going to shoot it, and maybe I'll kill it. I don't kill it. So I'm just like, oh, all right. Cool. And so, like, one of the lessons I learned, though, was, like, don't spread out. The Alpha Simian proxies of sharks was so cool on the proxy. Yeah, okay, and that's what they are. Yeah, Mantic games are quick to learn, absolutely. And yeah, dude, it was painted so well. It looked beautiful. Like, all of it was just amazing. And so I was putting all of it together. So, like, the first few games, I had spread my whole army out in deployment, right? And I kind of just tried to take the whole board. And then by round 3, round 4, like the third and fourth games, it was like, why would I do that? I don't do that in Firefight with Enforcers. Why would I do that in Dead Zone with Enforcers? Like, why don't I just try playing them the same way I play them in Firefight? And when I did that, that's when it really all came together. And, you know, it was just like I was moving things in tandem in tight groups and stuff instead of spreading out. and I just locked down half the board and then just collapsed in on the other half. And it just worked so much better. Like, moving everything like that, doing it like that. It was just like, all right, now that I've got this figured out, like, I feel confident that I could, I wouldn't necessarily win a tournament with it, but I feel confident that I could win more than I lose now that I understand the scoring and how to play the list that I had. You know, but I ended up, one win, one tie, two losses. You know, so like for my first time really ever playing the game, I definitely can't complain about those results. Like I'm pretty happy with it. And man, that game is super fun. It is a lot of fun. So if you've not played Dead Zone and you're watching, I would definitely check it out. If you like skirmish level games, it is a blast. It it uses, again, if you don't play it or you've never played it, you don't need a tape measure. It's just a handful of different tokens and some models and some terrain and a board, so then came, one thing I like is that Dead Zone style and Firefight style is the same. You can definitely apply a lot of the army concepts, right? Like if you have Veermen, you can flood the table. If you have enforcers, you should probably use similar tactics and strategies. And that was one thing I was noticing as I played, was like, okay, I need to apply these concepts to what I'm doing that I already built in this other game. And then Saturday and Sunday was the Kings of War tournament. Now, I'm going to tell you guys straight up, actually, real quick before I dig into that, what was it I was going to come circle back to? I don't remember. If you remember, let me know in the chat. I'll jump back to it. But we had Kings of War Saturday and Sunday. Best viewers on stream. Oh. I see. It's a bot. Cool. Kings of War Saturday, Sunday, 2-day event. I don't know anything about this game. Almost nothing. I've played maybe 3 games prior to the GT. That's it. And I'd only seen like 2 armies. That's it. So I have almost 0 knowledge going into it. So round 1, man, and I had a great time. I really did. Like, I had a good enough time that I was like, all right, I'm just going to go buy an army now. Like, this is what we're doing. Like, this is a great game. Round 1, I get paired up. His name's Jeremy Duval. I think that's his last name. Really nice dude. Told him straight up, I'm like, hey, bro, like, I don't know anything about the game. And now I remember what I was going to circle back to. And it's relevant, so we're going to talk about it now. So I'm like, I don't know anything about the game. It's whatever. Well, everybody's got list printouts. And that was another thing, is like every Mantic event, right? Like everybody's handing me list printouts. And I'm just like, I don't care. Are Chovar's still insane in Firefight? Chovar's? Am I missing something? Let me look them up. What do you mean Chovar's? Is that like a unit that I have not seen yet? I don't think that's probably a thing. Or is that like a nickname for something? Give me a second. Oh, is it the Amazing Labs dudes? I bet it is. Yeah, okay. I've only seen them a couple times. Sorry, I had to, like, and that's why, because I've only seen them a couple times and they don't live. Yeah, exactly. No, I remembered. Every time I've seen them, I'm just like, I don't know what you do. Pick it up. I'm not dealing with it. Because we do have one local Maison Labs player, and I did play against them at a couple tournaments and stuff. So it's one of those like, yep. I'd like to say they're pretty nutty, but I'd have to read through them. I haven't read through the Maison Lab stuff. Gotcha. So, the whole time I'm out there, people have their printouts, right? And they're just handing them to me, and I'm like, I'm not going to read it. And I just hand it back to them, and they're just like, oh. I'm just like, I don't care, man. It's whatever. Like, and like, with Firefight, it's more, it wasn't that I didn't know what any of it meant anyway. Like, in Dead Zone, I was just like, those are all just words on a page. Like, they don't mean anything to me. I'll pretend to read it if you want, but it's not going to mean anything until I play a few more games. And it was the same with Kings of War. But with Firefight, it was more just like, I don't need it. I can look at your models and I know exactly what they are. I know what they're going to do. Whereas like I said, with the other two games, it was just like, it's all just words on a page. So he goes to hand me his printout of his Northern Alliance army, and he's just like, here you go, man. And I'm like, I don't care. You're going to beat my ass. I'm going to learn. It's all I care about. And he was just like, oh, okay. And like I said, he was super cool. Real nice. Then I learned he's like one of the best players. Like, yes. Which, again, I'm glad that's actually what I got round one. Because it's like, okay, this is what... It really helped me to watch him and study how he played as he was taking his turn. Round two, I pulled... And I played Night Stalkers. And I might do a list. Now that I've played, I might do a list breakdown and kind of talk about that and my Dead Zone army. Like, I might do both of those now that I've done the games and know more about them. That being said, round two, I played Johnny. I think his last name's Wok. I think it's pronounced Wok. So, super nice dude. Played an army, Ogres, which was cool because Ogres was one of the armies I was like on the fence about maybe picking up, and I was like, okay, maybe I want this, maybe I don't. I'm gonna go ahead and check it out. Like, now that I get to see them on the table. But again, like, I don't know anything about anything. Like, dude could have literally said these Ogres hit on threes with 16 or 60-inch range guns, and I'd have been like, sure, you got it, man. Because I just don't know. And I'm more of a learn by doing. Like, I can read and learn, don't get me wrong. But I'd much rather just like, it's fine. I don't care. I'm not here to win. I'm here to learn, I just want to play. And so we played, and I think our final score was 3-2. He ended up winning. And then, we had a great time. We had a really fun time, though. And I got a ton of kill points that game because it was a kind of like combo scoring system where it like had some variables based on your kill points and your victory points and all these other things. Round three, I'm trying to remember who I played round three because it was my first win. And I don't remember if it was against Orcs. It had to have been Orcs. So round three, I play Orcs. Guy named Dan. Gotcha. Twilight Kin was one of those armies when I first kind of looked at the models that I had considered. I played Dan at the Michigan GT. We played Firefight together, actually. So, like, it was kind of cool to have that experience where I play against somebody that I played at an earlier event, like last Michigan GT. So that was really cool. He remembered me. I remembered him. We had a great time. And, it was a real close game. Again, it was 6-5, 5-4, something like that. I ended up squeezing a victory out, and it all came down to like his positioning at the end of the game. He could either risk rolling a d6 for his consolidation after he killed one of my units and tie me, or lose a point. Like, those were his only two options if he consolidated because of the way he was positioned and how it was on the objective and everything else. And he was just like, I don't want to take that gamble. I'll just take my 6-5. Like, that's fine. But we had a great time, and I really enjoyed playing with him. And again, first time I got to see the army, he had some Manticore, big, like, Manticore monsters and stuff. They were really cool looking. His paint job, gorgeous, as it always is. And then round 4, I ended up playing Chaos Dwarves, or Abyssal Dwarves. And I'm just like, fucking hate dwarves, man. Like, here we go. And, and again, it was a very similar experience to Dead Zone, where it was like, all right, round one, I'm just going to make sure I understand core mechanics. Round two, I'm going to kind of like work on my spacing and positioning. And then round three, it was like kind of putting it all together a little bit. And then round four, it was kind of the same thing, putting it all together a little bit, right? Like just continuing to fine tune. And honestly, I think his name was William. Super nice dude. We had a great game, a lot of fun. And I honestly think he would have won. I think that game was done like the deployments. I think that's where it really kind of was not in his favor. I had way more drops than him, and he just kind of clumped. He had golems, and he kind of clumped them off on one side of the table, and he did it early, so it allowed me to put all my speed on the other side of the table, and it allowed me to just like push all my tormentors and cavalry up and tag his much weaker flank, and then just crash in on everything else. There was a couple of lucky spikes that happened for both of us. Like, to be honest, like it is what it is. Like, we both had a couple of really lucky moments. So I think those kind of balanced out. Because turn one, I don't remember her name, but everybody calls her Shakira, so I had Shakira. And I marched her 20 inches out into the middle of nowhere, just hit her behind a building. And then jumped her over the building, and then enthralled his gargoyles into her, because I was like, man, if I get a few damage on him with her Doom, like, I could maybe pick up those gargoyles, and that wouldn't be so bad. But I didn't pick up the gargoyles. I had 5 attacks hitting on 3s, damage on 2s, and I got 1 through. And I was just like, oh no. But then he did a complete 180, and then surged one of his golems into her. And I was like, well, alright, well, that's at least a turn. I don't have to deal with the golem with anything else. And so, like, the golem whiffed. And I was just like, oh. So now we're just stuck there, right? Like, we're both just kind of stuck there. And that's not so bad for me. Because that thing hits hard, and it has some ranged attacks. So it's just like, that keeps that out of the game for a turn or two. We ended up tying it up for 3 turns, and allowed butchers to hit it in the rear. And when the butchers hit it in the rear, that's when it kind of like just fell apart. So I think the deployment was really what cost him in that game. Like, that one, I think if he'd have kind of spread his golems out a bit more, or maybe put them more centerboard to be able to better react to my speed. But when he had all his real heavy hitters on one side and all his troops on the other, it allowed my heavy, or my cavalry and my tormentors to just crash into the infantry and just kind of like start overrunning things. And I think that's what ended up doing it. So, but like I said, really fun game, really good opponent, and again, I learned a lot. And then round 5, I got my ass beat again. I was feeling real good going into it. I was like, yeah, I got 2 wins in a row. I might win more than I lose. Nah, dog, that ain't it. Super nice dude. Can't think of his name right now. I can picture his face. But he had undead. And he had 2 dragons, which I've no clue how they interact. He had a couple cavalry units that one of them had like haste. So he had a couple units of werewolves, just a lot of speed. And I was not ready for that. Like, those vampires were just like, I'm going to move like 22 inches. Haha. Yes, sir. That's it. And it was one of those, like, because they fly and they're so tall, there was one of those, like, there was a good teaching moment where it was like, oh, you didn't close this gap, and because of that, I can fit my base here. I can fly in there and charge you because I'm height 6. I can see everything. And, like, now you're just going to pick it up. And I was just like, oh, but that only took once, right? Like, that happened once, and I immediately learned that lesson. But unfortunately, I now had a vampire where I didn't want it. And I did kill it, but it disrupted what I had going. And so it was just like, all right. And then when the other one came crashing in, it was like, all right, do I just keep fighting this thing? Or do I just ignore it and understand that it's probably going to kill a unit a turn and move on with my life? I opted for option B, and I honestly don't think that was the wrong decision. I think I just my positioning early in that round. Yeah, that's super fair. I mean, the undead player gets to put vampires where they want them, but that's one of those like I think if I did that over again, I'd probably still try to ignore one of them. Um, but I don't know. It's one of those like it just kind of position things a little tighter and a little better to try to screen it out because it's one of those like I just didn't know and I didn't think about it and I got punished for it and he was like, I'm sorry man, but this is how I'm gonna have to do this, and I was like, no, 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 don't apologize, this is what I need so that I learn, like I need to see it. And he was just like, all right, and like I said, we had a ton of fun, great time, and I learned a lot. And then and I'm going to talk about this in a minute too, I also came away with another one of these. And this fella right here is the Countercharge Award. This is actually the third place. The other one was the Countercharge. But before the tournament, I was talking to Adam. He was the organizer for Kings of War. Same Adam I played in Firefight. And we were talking, and I was like, hey, man, give me a second. We'll get there. Oh, he was just like, hey, dude, we were talking about different things. He was like, you want to know what's funny is we actually have an award called the Countercharge Award. And it's like named for, and I think kind of like made by the Countercharge podcast, is my understanding, whom I got to meet. Rob, he's a super nice dude. Enjoyed my experience with him. And he was just like, hey, man, yeah, you just like, if you finish dead middle, perfectly in the middle, you get the Countercharge Award. And I was like, that's hilarious. He's like, it's the hardest award to win. And I looked at him. I was like, fucking bet. I'm going to do it. And like, I didn't win it intentionally. I was just being a smartass, right? But for me to have done that and then ended up actually winning it was really funny to me. It was just like, I told you. And he's just like, nah, I mean, it was all luck. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it wasn't. But I ended up finishing that tournament with 2 wins and 3 losses, which, again, we're talking about effectively is the first time I really played that game. And my first time playing it, I just went to a 2-day GT and played it at a comp level. I walked away with the Countercharge Award, and I walked away with a ticket, an entry ticket to Hoosier Storm 2026 in February. So now I have to build an army for Kings of War because I want to go do that. But the cool part about it was, I went with a couple of buddies. I went with Garrett, and then my buddy Bailey, who runs Dank Lists, which is kind of like a 40K centric hobby and Dark Angel centric hobby and like comp podcast. It's on YouTube. He's actually one of my like preferred channels. So like when I recommend people, he's one of the ones I recommend. But he and I are going to start doing like some collaborative content regarding Firefight and regarding Kings of War and all these Mantic games, because he had such a fun and positive experience with the Firefight tournament, and then just being in the room and watching Kings of War when he wasn't doing other stuff. So like he recognized just how amazing and how just welcoming the Mantic community is just from watching. He played in the Firefight tournament and immediately went and bought his Firefight army. He went and bought the Night Stalkers like mega box or whatever it is. And then he came in during the Kings of War tournament. That's right. He came in during the Kings of War tournament, saw how cool and how because he's a bit more on the hobby side than I am, and I've never pretended like I'm a hobbyist. I've always told you I'm a rules and player first, and the hobby comes second to me. Well, he's a bit more of a hobby first. Everything else is kind of secondary for him. So seeing like the hobby potential of the game and then actually seeing the game in action, he was just like, all right, I guess I'm going to build an army for this too. And I think right now his plan is to just do some like movement trait converters for his Night Stalkers until he decides if and if he wants to do anything else. So that was kind of cool too. So we're going to do some collab content. I am going to start picking up a little bit more like Dead Zone and Kings of War content. I've settled on what army I'm building for Kings of War. I'm going to try to get more games of Dead Zone in. And then I'm going to be working on... I'm really going to be placing a lot of focus on just a lot of the Mantic ecosystem right now. I do have some Fallout stuff that I told some people I was going to do, so I'm definitely going to do it. But, that being said, man, I sure am thirsty. You know, that being said, like I said, it's gonna be a bit more like veering towards just the Mantic ecosystem for a bit, because man, I don't think I've ever been part of such a just warm and welcoming and just generally friendly community. After the fire, after every event, every night, like it was, you know, you've got all these different companies where they're all shut down for the night. But then there's just like this group of people over in the Mantic corner where they're just all like having fun, and they're playing games together, and they're doing all this stuff together. And it's not just like I'm here to sell you things and run this event. It's also like we are a community, and I really appreciated that aspect of it, you know. And it was great. Even Marcelo, even he welcomed me, and I make that joke because. First of all, super nice guy. Had a really good time with my interactions with him, but he is like the opposite of me, right? You get me in a tournament setting and you get me at a table, and I am like at an 11 to 13 all the time. I can't sit down. I'm bouncing around. I'm doing all kinds of things. And even now, like I'm still moving, right? Like I can't play in a chair. I just can't do it. And he's the opposite. He's like stoic, perfectly still, doesn't make noise, is very just like, you know. And the whole time I'm just like, wow, let's go, Marcelo, yeah. And the poor guy spent like, because he also did the hat trick, right? Like he did Dead Zone, he did Firefight, and he did Kings of War. So, of course, every chance I got, I'm just like, yeah, because he's not loud, and I am, and I'm just like, I'm gonna be loud at you, because that's what loud, obnoxious people do. We find people who aren't, and we decide that they need to endure what it is we have to offer the world. So, but no, it was one of those, like I said, like, overall, 10 out of 10. I'm gonna try to, well, I'm not gonna do the hat trick next year, I don't think. It really just depends on what time the Dead Zone tournament is. Because the 3 in the afternoon until like 10, 11 at night was really rough. And that's not anybody's fault. That just happened to be when it got scheduled. But I think if it's earlier, like if we can get started at like 8 or 9 and then be done by like 2 or 3 type of thing, I would probably do it. But if it's going to be another like afternoon into evening, I'm probably just going to take the day off. And I'll probably just do Firefight and Kings of War. Is kind of where I'm at. That being said, I also want to start looking around locally and seeing who runs what near me. I don't want to be the only one running these events. So I've got to poke around and see who's doing what around me and how far I got to go. Like, I know there's some Kings of War players in Indy. That's kind of a drive. But I'll be more than happy to make it every once in a while for like a tournament or a get-together, stuff like that. And, you know, I'm sure there's people in Chicago that play, but I don't want to drive to Chicago. So really it's just like finding things where I don't have to go into an actual city. And I know Indy's a city, but it's not Chicago, you know. So I think we're going to probably wrap this up now that we've all hung out for, you know, quite a while. And we've chatted for a bit. We've kind of covered my experiences with Adepticon. So again, everybody that's watching, I appreciate that you're here. I appreciate that you're watching. And I hope... if you went to Adepticon, you had a great time. And if you didn't and you go next year, I look forward to seeing you. Thanks a lot and have a good day. Maybe. Are we shutting down? We are.